Welcome back, guys. Have you ever heard of the saying that the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time? Well, that's what I'm trying to do with learning SQL. Trying to take it slow so you not only understand writing the code, but down the road you'll be able to make sense of the code and put it into words for a story. And we started off the first session with SQL. We're importing the data and learning about formatting and creating a new database and a new table and adding headers. And then last session we wrote queries with the select, from, and where lines. And today we're going to be adding the group by and order by lines to our query. So let's start with a quick review of the 5 words or phrases that are important in SQL. Select, from, and where. We went over these already. And then the next 2 are group by and order by. Select. This lists the column names that you want. And as we ran a number of queries last time, the asterisk selects all the fields in your table. And you can add count, parentheses, asterisk, parentheses, to count the number of records. You can do the same thing with sum to sum records and average to average records. And of course those would be if your fields had a number in them. And then if you do all that, we're going to use the word as, to rename the field that we're putting the data where we counted or summed. We'll go over that today. From. The from line is the name of the table or the query that you want to analyze. And down the road, when we get to joining tables together, the real powerful tool in Excel, then we'll add multiple tables or multiple queries to our from line. And where. Where, of course, is where you filter your data. And we learned last class that text data gets single quotes around them, and data that are numbers or integers do not get any quotes around them. We use the equal sign for direct matches. We use the like, then it's a single quote, percent sign, space percent sign, single quote for a wildcard. And of course we can add an and if you want to use multiple filters, or an or if you want to use multiple filters. And of course in SQLite, not in all database managers, but in SQLite, the where line is case sensitive. So that's a quick review. Let's go over your homework. And the homework was to import the CSV file called incident_2018. And we'll be writing more code from that file today. And then you wanted to write 3 where queries to select the following information: all shoplifting cases from gas stations, all cases involving assaults, and all cases where place 1 was residential and the offense was either an overdose or an intimidation. So let's get started with that. So this is the incident_2018 CSV file that we want to import. And I'm looking at it as a CSV file, and I can see we have a full address, the offense date, location, place 1 and place 2, the case close date, case status, and the offense. Now this is very similar to the data that we used last time for Excel. I cut out a few fields, but that's alright. And I'm looking at it, and there are no numbers. In other words, there's not a salary or an integer. So you could import it one of 2 ways. I would really like for y'all to create the shell like we did before with the column names and the format types, and then import it. But you didn't really have to in this case. I'd like y'all to do that just because it's better safe than sorry, and that's the sort of the most conservative way to do it. But in this case you didn't have to. You could just create a new database and then import the CSV. So this is the file that we're going to be importing, and I'm going to close this out and I'm going to open up SQLite. Okay, I'm opening up SQLite right now, and by now hopefully you all know how to find it and how to open it up, and I am going to create a new database. I'm going to navigate to where I want it, and I'm going to give it a name. In this case, I'm going to name it incident_2018. Click Save. I'm going to call my table the same thing. And again, I don't have to add the fields here right now. If you all did it, that's terrific. I hope you do, but you don't have to. So I'm just going to click Save or Cancel, and this will save a little bit of time. And now I'm going to do a File, Import, Table from CSV, and there's my incident_2018 CSV file. Take a look at it real quick. I have full address, offense date, location, the two place fields, case close date, case status, and the offense type. Looks good to me. The first column, or the first rows are headers, and of course it is comma separated. So I'm going to click OK, and it's importing. And you notice that this is taking a little bit longer than our Charlotte nonprofits because this is a much larger file. It's almost done. Import complete. Great. And now I'm going to browse my data just to sort of get a look at it, make sure it's in the database and I like it. Spread out these columns. Spread this out. A little bit more. There we go. And you can see that I have 94,170 records and no errors. Bunch of nulls here in the case close date, but that's alright. That just means that there was no date listed, and I bet a lot of you may remember that from using this data in Excel. So the data looks good. The data structure, let's look at that real quick. They're all text, which is fine. And of course, we want to run some SQL queries. Now the first query that we wanted to run was to grab all records where the place to field was a gas station and the offense field was shoplifting. So did you all grab that? It was a simple where one. And this I believe we used the AND. So it would be select all because we want all the records from incident 2018 where place 2 equals gas station and offense equals shoplifting. I think that looks good to me. I believe in my data, and I can double check it, but I believe gas and station were capitalized as well as shoplifting. Remember, capitalizations, they matter in SQLite. And yeah, I can see private residence, both the P and the R are capitalized. So I'm going to run this query and see if I get any results. There we go. So that was the first query. I got 708 rows. Is that what you all got? And this was select all from the incident 2018 table where place 2 equals gas station. And in this case, you needed to add a second clause to that. So you would use and offense equals shoplifting. And again, there's single quotes and capitalization matters, and then you run it. Makes sense? So let's save that one as shoplifting and move on to the next. Save. Okay. Okay, the next query that you had to write for homework was to grab all the cases involving assaults. So let's look at our main data. Click on Browse Data and check out the offense. And I'm going to filter it for assault. Okay. So here you go. You start with aggravated assault. We also have simple assault. Back to aggravated. I think there might be some sexual assault in here as well. And there's a lot of them, you see. Looks like 11,000 if you look down here. Down here, 11,000. So the best way to write this query, let's go back to our execute SQL. Let's create a new blank SQL field. And I'm going to start with the two easiest lines. Select all from incident 2018. And let's get the where line started. And the idea is to grab all the different types of assaults for this, right? So you want the offense field, where offense is, you could do it a couple different ways. You could do where offense equals aggravated assault, or offense equals simple assault, or offense equals sexual assault, and grab however many there are. Or you could do it the other way and use the wildcard, where offense like, remember the wildcard, then it's single quote, %, and I'm just going to say SSAULT, just in case there's one that's capitalized or lowercase. Then I'm going to close it off with a % and another single quote. So where offense, like, single quote, %, SSAULT, %, single quote. Does that make sense? So this is using the wildcard, the like wildcard. And if I run this, and if I do it correctly, it should grab all types of assaults. Let's run it. There we go. You can see my results. That looks good because my initial filter set around 11,000. Looks like I have 11,000. And a quick scroll. I started with aggravated assault. Now I have simple assault. Back to aggravated. So that was using the wildcard. Like I said, you can look through all these and find out all the specific ones that said assault in them, and then write an or statement in your where line. But the easiest way to do it was to use like assault. Let's save that one as assault, and let's do the final one for your homework. Save. Great. Now the final one is coming up next. And for this one, we're going to go back to our browse data, and we wanted place 1 to be residential. All right, we wanted that the entire time. And we wanted the offense to either be overdose or intimidation. So we wanted place to be residential and offense to be either overdose or intimidation. So this is going to use both the and the or statements in our where line. Does that make sense? Let's add one more SQL blank document, and we're going to go select all from incident 2018, where place 1 equals residential. Remember to capitalize it. And now after I write and, I'm going to have to open up with a parentheses. So Shift 9, offense equals overdose, or offense equals intimidation. So let's review that, make sure I wrote it right, and see if this is the same thing that you all got. So we're selecting all records in our first line from our table called Incident 2018, where place 1 equals residential. So we want to grab all residential records, that's for sure. And the offense either equaled overdose or the offense equaled intimidation. Does that make sense? Is that how you all wrote it? So I'm going to run this, and let's see what we get. There's our records. So we want all place 1s to be residential. They look good to me. Just going all the way down. So all place 1s right now are residential. And the offense field should either be overdose or intimidation. There's intimidations. There's some overdoses. Back to intimidations. All the way up. There we go. That was the last one. Save this one, and then we'll move on to learning some of the group by lines in our SQL statement. Now the group by line is either going to follow your from line, or if you have a where line, it's going to follow your where. And what group by does, it says to SQL, group these fields that I select together. And here's a hint. If you name some fields in your select line, they have to be in your group by line, right? If you say, give me the name of the employee and the date the employee was hired in my select line, the name of the employee and the date the employee was hired has to be in your group by line. So a lot of times the group by line just mirrors your select line. And when you're selecting all records with a select all, you don't need group by. That's why we haven't been using it yet. Make sense? And then order by, we're going to add this one as well. This is the last line in your data or in your query, and this sorts your data. You can either order it by the column name or the column number. In other words, order by employee name, and it's going to sort by employee name. Or if employee name was the first column in your data, you can just say order by the number 1. And then you can also sort it by either ascending or descending, just like in Excel. So we have group by and order by, the 2 extra lines we're going to be learning about in Excel. Okay, I'm back at our main Incident 2018 data. You can see it right up here. And say I wanted to write a query using the group by line that essentially picks out the name or the type of each offense listed in my data. And remember, if you look down here, actually I have to get to my incident table. There I am. I have to get rid of my assaults. So there we go. And if you look down here, we have 94,000 rows. And say I wanted to see each type of offense that's listed in this data. That's where we use our group by. And it's way too much just to scroll down and write them all on a piece of paper or something like that. So go up to Execute SQL. Click that. Let's start a new query. So use the icon on the left to open a tab. And in this case, we're going to start with select. And we don't want all our records this time, so we're going to ignore the asterisk. And we just want to find out a list of all the offenses in our incident underscore 2018 table. So the field that we want is offense. So this says select just the offense field. And of course we need the from line now. from, and then from's not going to change. It's still going to be incident underscore 2018. Now we're going to ignore the where line. We don't need where. Where is a filter, and we're not trying to filter out any specific types or kinds of records. But we need group by. And remember the PowerPoint just a few seconds ago, anything that's in my select line has to be in my group by line. So type in group by, 2 words, and then the word offense. So what this is telling SQL is to select the offense column from my incident underscore 2018 data, and then group the offense column. So let's run that and see what we get. There we go. You can see I have a list of 68 rows right down there, and it's every type of offense in my main table. Everything from credit card and teller fraud, to keep scrolling down, drug equipment violations, forcible fondling, justifiable homicide, and so on and so on. Right? So that's group by. I'm selecting a specific column or columns if I wanted, and because it's in my select line, it has to be in my group by line. But this doesn't help us all that much, does it? Because what it's just doing is listing the offense types. But we can add another column. Remember I said that your group bys and your selects can also count, sum, or average data. So type a comma after offense. So you have select offense, comma. Then the word count, C-O-U-N-T. Shift 9 for parentheses to open. Now we add an asterisk. Close the parentheses. And we're going to take baby steps. So let's run this, because what this is saying is select all from offense, or select all my fence fields, and then count them. So let's run that real quick. Baby steps, remember. There we go. This is just like a pivot table, where it's counting how many phrase were in my data, 186, how many animal cruelties were at 7, how many arsons were at 136, and so on. So it's just like a pivot table, but writing the code behind it. And that was select the field name, and then comma, count, shift 9, asterisk, and shift 0 to close it. But we can improve on this. 2 more ways, actually. 1, look at the header for the second field. It just says count, asterisk. That doesn't make sense, right? We know what it is, but we want to put it in English. So what I'm going to do is rename it. And you rename it with the as, A-S. What this is telling SQL is to count the number of records and rename this column as, and then we fill in a blank. What do you want to name that column? And something generic that I always use, or I use 9 times out of 10, is something like this. Num records. So this is just my way of saying count the offenses, rename it as num records or number of records. Now you can name it to whatever you want. You can write it out, number underscore of underscore offenses. It doesn't matter, but make sure you name something, and make sure you name the column with a header that you'll understand what it is. So I'm going to run this. And there we go. The data is the same. We still have 186 phrase, and we still have 136 arsons, but my header is different. Now my header is number of records. That makes sense. But we can tweak this query just a little bit more, actually. And that's with the order by line. So make another line under group by and type in the words order by. And this sorts the data. Right now, as you can probably guess, the data is sorted by the offense. It starts with A's, then it goes all the way down to W's with wired fraud and worthless checks. But because we're in the communications business, we typically like to sort it descending. So we like to sort it by, what's happening most. And the easiest way to do that, or the way I do it, is just to count over how many columns. So this is column 1, this is column 2. So type in the numeral 2, and then DESC, descending. So this is telling SQL to grab my data and then order it by the second column descending, and then run that. Click off it and then run it. There we go. You can see theft from motor vehicles, we're number 1 at 9,614. And we actually used pivot tables to find that out, and we did a kind of a fake story on it. And then simple assaults were 2, 8,488, and all the way down the line, let's see what the least common offense was welfare fraud with only 1. Does this make sense? So we're not using the where line because we're not filtering the data, at least not yet, but we're selecting the field that we want. In this case, it's offense. We're counting with after a comma count how many times that happens. Then we're renaming that new column. In this case, we're naming it number of records. That's what's in the select line. The from is just their table name, incident underscore 2018. That hasn't changed. And then group by, 9 times out of 10 in this class, group by is going to have whatever regular fields are in your select. In this case, we don't add the count as number of records in the group by because this is a new field that we created. It's not a field in our data. So we don't need it in our group by. And then order by is the way to sort your data. And 2 means it's the second column over. And DESC means descending. So sort most to least. Does that make sense? Let's save this one as offense count. Save as view. Offense count. And click OK. Okay, let's try another easy one that's going to mirror this one. Let's go back to our data. So I clicked on Browse Data, that tab. And let's count how many times that there was a reported crime at each of these place 2s. So how many happened in the woods? How many happened in a street or a highway? School, college, or university, all the way down the line. So how many reported crimes happened at each of these place 2s? So go back to your Execute SQL tab and open a new tab on the left-hand side. Now if you want to hit pause on the video and try to write that yourself, great. If not, follow along. Okay. If you watch me type, this is what I got. And if you tried it on your own, let's compare the two, okay? So before I hit run, I'm going to go over my SQL. The first line, I'm selecting just my place 2 column. I'm putting a comma after it. Then I'm adding the word count, parentheses, asterisk, parentheses. So I'm creating a new column that's going to count how many times place 2 pops up in my data. And then I'm going to rename that column. And again, I'm pretty boring. I just say as number of records. From incident underscore 2018, group by, it's going to have to mirror your select, at least the columns that are in your actual data, which is place 2. So group by place 2. And we're journalists, we always want to find out what happens most. Order by to descending. So select place 2, count as number of records from incident 2018, group by place 2, order by to descending. Let's try that. There we go. Is this what you all got? That most crimes happened at private residences, 23,465. Apartments and duplexes were second with 16,400, followed by street and highways, and down, so on and so on. Let's see what had the least amount of crimes. Taxi cabs, rest areas, farm facilities, mobile home dealerships all had 1. And if I want to inspect the data a little bit more, you can see that I have 80 different rows returned, and look how fast it run. I mean, less than a second. But that's another group by line. Let's save this one. And I'm going to save this as place 2 count. Place 2 underscore count. There we go. Let's try another. Now you can add columns to your data. So say for instance, well, let me back up. We already found how many times each type of crime happened, right, in our first query when we counted offenses. And we found out in our second query where they happened most often. Now we can add those two together to add another column in our data and get a little bit more specific information. So let me open up a new tab right there, and say I wanted to write a query that selects the 2 columns that we already investigated. So selects the offense column, it selects the place 2 column, and it counts how many times records happened when both of those are selected. Does that make sense? So try doing that on your own, and follow along if you have to, but you're going to select the 2 columns and count them just like we did the first, and then because you selected 2 in your select line, you have to include it in your group by line. Select offense, okay, my first line, I'm selecting the offense column from my data, so that's going to be in my results, and I'm selecting place 2 from my data, so that's going to be in my results. And then, like always, I'd say 9 times out of 10, or almost 10 out of 10, honestly, we're going to add the word count with the parentheses, asterisk parentheses, and then rename it. So almost always include that at the end of your select line if you're not selecting all records. Of course, we're going to have from incident 2018. We're still not filtering the data, at least not yet. So we're going to go right to our group by line. Now what has to go in your group by line? I selected offense and place 2, so they have to go in your group by. Offense, place 2. And let's order it by descending as well. So how would you do that? Well, if you said 2 descending, you'd be wrong. Because let's count over. Offense is the first column. Place 2 is the second column. Number of records is the third column. So order by 3, descending. So what this says is from my incident 2018 table, right here, select the columns for offense, and select place 2, and count how many times records happen when both of those are selected. Then group it by offense in place 2, and order it by, of course, our count, 3 descending. So let's run that. There we go. So if I were to write this down as a paragraph in a story, I could say thefts from motor vehicles happened most often at private residences, and that number was 2,912. And again, private residence was also number 2 with simple assaults. So this breaks down your data even more. And I would keep adding queries like this. Remember, in a couple weeks ago, I talked about casting a wide net with your original data, or your original queries, or your original formulas or pivot tables in Excel. Well, this is the same thing. Our first query, where we just counted the number of offenses, that was a pretty wide net. And now we're narrowing it. We looked at places, now we looked at places and offenses. Does that make sense? Did you all get this one? I'm going to save this as offense place 2 count. And the reason I save my data like that, one, I put an underscore in between the words because I can run queries off my data, believe it or not. And two, if I were to come back to this query, say a week from now or 2 weeks from now, I want to just look at the name of the view and know what I'm looking at. I don't want there to be any sort of guessing at what I'm looking at and say, why did I write that, or what does this query mean? Offense place 2 count is pretty cut and dry. So save that, click OK. Let's try another one. Now, what if I said that I want you to count the number of times each offense happened, period. We already did that, right? That was the first query that we did. But if I said I want you to count how many times each offense happened at a commercial place. Let's go back to our main data. So click on Browse Data, and then Incident 2018. Make sure you have that one selected. So commercial place. Let me see if that's in place 2 or if that's in place 1. Scrolling down. I think it's in place 1. Let's do a filter. There we go. So it's in place 1. So I wanted to count how many times each offense happened at a commercial place. This is a little wrinkle. It's actually going to be adding what we already learned to our query. So go back to Execute SQL, add a new tab. So I want to count offenses, so I'm pretty sure I know my select line, right? So I'm selecting offense, and I'm counting how many times each of them happened, and I'm renaming that column number of records. Still from my incident underscore 2018. This is where we add in last session. We need a where clause here. And what are we looking at? We're going to count the number of offenses happened at a commercial place. So where place 1 equals single quote, remember? And remember, capitalizations matter. So you need capital C and capital P and single quotes around them, and your data should turn red. Now what do we write? Group by. And why do we write group by? Because we have a field in our select line. So group by offense, right? because that's in our select line. And we always want to order it, or we usually want to order it, right? Order by to descending. So we're pushing everything together from the last two classes. We're selecting just the offense column. We're counting how many times each offense happened. We're looking at just our incident 2018 data. We're adding a filter, so we want to see when offenses happened only when place 1 equals commercial place. We're grouping it by offense because offense is in our select line, and then we're going to order it by our count descending. So try that, and there you go. See? And know what you could do, and I would recommend it as you're getting started, is if you add in your select line place 1 and then a comma. And because you added in your select line, add it in your group by. So we have offense, comma, place 1, then our count, and down in group by we have offense and place 1. Now if you run this is a good way to fact check yourself, because when I run it, I'll create a new column for place 1, and it should all be populated with commercial place, nothing else. So let's try running it. There we go. So this is a good way to fact check yourself. And I can scroll down, and as you can see, commercial place does not change. But what I'd have to change, now that I'm looking at it, I'm going to change this 2 descending to 3 descending and rerun it. There we go. So the most common type of crime in Mecklenburg County that happened at a commercial place was a time that CMPD, our Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, calls all other thefts. And that was 2,054. Second most common was theft from a motor vehicle, 1,687. Then unlisted non-criminal activity, simple assault, burglary, and down the line. Not bad, huh? We added our select, from, where, group by, and order by lines all together. We tried to do it in steps to make it easy. So I'm going to save this one. I'm going to save it as offense, commercial, count. Click OK. Let's try another. Keep practicing, guys. So I'm going to go back to browse data just to get an understanding at our main data. And say I wanted to count the number of offenses, just like before, this field, that happened at a certain road. Right? And a relatively nice road in Charlotte is this road right here, Sharon Amity. It's a nice road. It runs through sort of south central Charlotte. So what if I wanted to count all the different types of offenses, in this case it's a weapons law violation, that happened at somewhere on Sharon Amity Road? How would you do that? Well, let's go to Execute SQL. Let's create a new SQL tab. And let's think about it. Count the number of offenses that happened on Sharon Amity Road under a number of different types. So, select line, you can probably guess. Select offense, and I'm going to count them. I'm going to rename that new column as number of records. From hasn't changed yet. Incident underscore 2018. Where, and I'm going to skip this for a second because that's where the trick comes in. And I'm going to go right to group by. And because the offense column is in our select line, the offense column has to be in our group by line. And we always like to find what's happening most often, so order by to descending. Okay. Looks like all we have left is the where. And we want to find all crimes that happened on Sharon Amity Road. But look, you have 4732 Sharon Amity, 3061 Sharon Amity, 5801 Sharon Amity, 5501. So we're going to have to use the like line, where full address, because that's the name of the field, full address like Sharon Amity. So we're not saying equals, we're saying like. And when you run a like statement, remember it's single quote, %, and remember where lines in SQLite are case sensitive. So Sharon Amity was all capitalized. Close it out with the %, then a single quote. So what this where line says is filter out only the data where the offense field is sort of like Sharon Amity. I don't care what's before it, and that's what that % means, and I don't care what's after it, and that's what that % means. So let's try that and see what we get. There we go. Hit and run was number 1 at 81. Shoplifting, number 2 at 70. And I have 41 rows. But I want to fact check myself. And what you could do is go back here to your data. Make sure it's selected as 2018. And just try Sharon Amity, just to eyeball it. And if you really wanted to fact check yourself, you could add up this 146 way down here and add up all these records as well. But that's using our select line, our group by line, and adding our where line with a wildcard, like single quote, %, Sharon Amity, %, single quote. Remember the wildcard. So save that as offense Sharon Amity count. There we go. And let's try one more query today before I ask you to do a couple for homework, but one more group by query. And let's stick with the wildcard, and we're going to go back to our main data, and we're going to count the place twos. So we're going to count the sort of the more specific area that a crime happened. So these are ATMs and then a bar or tavern. And 2 downtown streets in Charlotte are Tryon Street, and Caldwell. And the newspaper's office is actually on Caldwell. So, what if I said count the number of times crime happened on Caldwell or Sharon Amity? Or I'm sorry, Caldwell or Tryon. Count the number of times crimes happened on a specific place, but I want the 2 streets to be either Caldwell or Tryon. So place 2 count those with the where as either Caldwell or Tryon. Does that make sense? Let's add a new tab. So count place twos. That's a select line that we're getting used to by now, right? Okay. I skipped the where line again because that's the most intricate in this one, because I'm counting place 2, and here's my count, and renaming it as number of records from my incident table. Because place 2 is in my select line, it has to be in my group by line, and I'm going to order it by my count. So where? I want it either where a crime happened on Tryon or where on Caldwell. So this will sort of be just like the Sharon Amity query that we ran last time. So where full address, right? Like, we'll do Tryon first. Remember, it's capitals. So I have where full address, like Tryon, with the single quote, percent Tryon, percent single quote. Now I need an or, right? Because I want Tryon or Caldwell. If I were to add Tryon and Caldwell, well, that wouldn't make sense because there's no way a crime happened on 2 streets at the same time. So I add the word or, then add the column again, right? Full address, and then your wildcard. Full address like Caldwell. So let me review that whole thing. Select the place and count the number of records. Place 2 and count how many times each of these crimes happened on place 2. From the table that we've been using, which is the incident underscore 2018, where the full address was either Tryon or the full address included the word Caldwell. And that's Caldwell. Group by place 2 and order by 2 descending. Now I haven't even run this yet, and I see for some reason my group by and my order by are still red. I look at select, from, and where are all blue. So I'm looking back here and I see I have a double quote. Make that a single quote. And now all my keywords have turned blue, right? And reds are just my like statements. So let's run that. And there we go. 58 rows remained. This counted all the places where a crime happened on either Caldwell or Tryon streets in Charlotte. And the most common place where these crimes happened were on the street and highway, which living here makes sense because, you know, they're popular places to park and have cars. But they also have a lot of commercial spaces, a lot of bars and restaurants, obviously department stores and gas stations, hotels down the list. So I'm going to save this one as place 2. Tryon, Caldwell, count. Place 2, Tryon, Caldwell, count. Okay. Now let's go over a couple questions that I want you guys to answer for your homework. Okay, write 3 different group by queries that count the following. the number of recorded crimes on each date. So the date that the crimes happened. And save that view as date count. Then write an SQL statement that counts the number of each offense in which the case was closed. So number of each offense in which the case was closed. And save that one as offense closed count. And finally, how many motor vehicle thefts happened at each address? How many motor vehicles thefts happened at each address? So write a query that counts that as well. I hope this is all sort of coming together. I know online learning this stuff can be a little tricky. You know, I can't read your faces and kind of slow things down or speed things up if you have questions. But I'm glad that some of y'all are reaching out to me online. That's great.